Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Islamic Awakening with me, Raza Kazim. The interpretation of the status of women within the Islamic framework has been challenged both from within Muslim societies as well as the usual onslaught from outside. Issues raised vary from dress codes to inheritance laws to polygamy. By highlighting these, have we even chosen the right starting point, or are we reacting to external agendas?
In recent years, debates in the West have largely focused on the more visible aspects of the status of Muslim women in Islam, with many claiming that women have less rights to men. But this is an oft-repeated misconception. Women's equal rights in Islam began immediately in the Quran. According to the Quran, men and women have the same spirit. There is no superiority in the spiritual sense between men and women.
As the man is important, the woman is important, but we are not the same. We are the same in front of God. Like, we're going to be judged for the same things, for the things that we do in this life, good things or bad things, yeah. But we are not the same, but we complement each other.
It allows women to have self-confidence, be independent.
We have all kind of rights. It's just how the media tries to focus on the negative bits, and I think in each religion, in each culture, you would always get things that women can or can't do, but it has nothing to do with our religion. So I'm from Saudi Arabia, born and raised, and things like driving and a lot of things that you can't really do as a woman, it's not written in Quran, it's just how Saudis interpret religion.
To address these issues, we have our esteemed guest, Professor Tariq Ramadan. Welcome to the program.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Islamic feminism. To what extent are Muslims being reacting to and tempered by the needs of external gods?
I think it's important to, as you are putting it, to look at the context, because it's not a discussion that we have in a void. It's a discussion that is very loaded in terms of politics, in terms of relationship with the West or with the dominant culture. So yes, the Muslims very often are reacting to what is put to them, the questions, and as you mentioned, we're talking about the dress code, we're talking about polygamy, we are talking about the status of women in Muslim majority countries, for example. Now, having said that, we as Muslims, we have to be very cautious, not at the end coming to the point where we are saying, oh, it's all coming from the West and they are attacking us, without being self-critical. What Islam is saying is not exactly what the Muslims are doing, and we have to be self-critical. And especially when it comes to women, not to respond to the West, but to be more consistent with our own religion and our own principles. So this is something which is important, and no one can deny that in many Muslim majority countries, women are now facing discriminations and things that have nothing to do with Islam, but done in the name of Islam. So we have to be self-critical, knowing at the same time that some foreign forces and powers are playing with this to put the Muslims in a very specific situation.
We're going to go on to looking at some of those issues, but before we do that, why do Muslims feel the need to respond to Western agendas with regards to issues to do with discussing women at this point in time, and sometimes the responses end up being either incoherent or inadequate and actually don't do the topic any justice. So why is that need there?
Yes, I think that this is a big question. If you are living in Western societies and you are under pressure, for example, day in, day out, you are questioned about this. Oh, Muslims have a problem with women, Islam is against women. at the end, of course, you have to say something. So psychologically and religiously, you are questioned. So you feel that you have to respond in order to be accepted, in order to show, oh, you know, Islam. So you end up at the end in the discussion
sorry to interrupt, but should we be looking for that acceptance? I mean, is that acceptance needed? Is that perhaps the wrong way of framing ourselves?
It's wrong and right at the same time. It's wrong to try only to be accepted, but sometimes the picture is so wrong, it's so troubled, the perception is so negative that you have to say something. For example, I wouldn't come into a discussion with someone, you know, to apologize for being a Muslim, but sometimes I'm dealing with people who they don't know. They are sincerely ignorant about the issue, and they are putting some question, and even some people working in the government, even some journalists. So you have to distinguish between clarifying the picture or reacting to the attacks. So this is something which is important. On the other side, there is also something which it's very problematic, is that the people who are dominating you, or the people who are putting you in a corner with their questions, they are putting you in, are framing the whole discussion, or phrasing the questions in a way where you react. So you end up saying what Islam is not, and not, as you were saying, we need to come with the big picture. We need to start with our principles and not only to respond to the questions. And as I'm always saying to Muslims, sometimes when you are in these situations in the West, or even in Muslim majority countries, because it's exactly the same that we have with, you know, Muslim majority countries dealing with women, and they are responding to the West saying, oh, the way you treat women, the way you are imposing dress code and things like this. We sometimes have to question the questions the people are putting to us. They say, well, no, this is the way you want to see it. It's not the way we are looking at it from within.
Let's look into before we go into the practical things that you talked about in your response. Just look at the theory. Women's role within the Islamic framework is sometimes said to be lesser than that of men. Is that the case?
No, it's not. And I think that this is where it's very important to come to, first, there are levels and there are dimensions. In anything which has to do with our relationship to God, no difference. You have to do exactly the same duties, the same obligation, and the same religious obligations and spiritual commitment. Which means that sometimes with our brothers and sisters in Islam, it's as if, you know, for women it's less important to pray or to go to the mosque. No. This, you have exactly the same obligations. You have to do this and you have to be committed. On the other side, within society, if you look at the whole dimension, it's not only, you know, they are complementing each other. There is a sense of equality within society, and they should be equally committed. And I would say that the Islamic discourse on this has to be reassessed on one thing which is important. The great majority of what we got from our tradition, the great majority of the literature, and what we call it turath, coming from the past, was produced by men. That's the reality of it. And very often when you are a man and you talk about women, you talk about the role of woman as a wife, as a daughter, or as a mother. But women as women is something which is very important here, and that we need to have this discourse, that we are not only talking about men as men. We are doing this every time, but a woman is a woman before being a wife or a daughter or a mother. So this spiritual understanding is also something that we have to raise, not to please the West, not to please the dominant culture, but to be much more consistent with the very essence of the spiritual teaching of Islam.
And here are two men talking about women. So
that's the point.
The irony can't be lost in this thing. And if women, you know, you talked about equality. If women are equal, how do we define that equality? Because there are clear instances, you talked about the fact that, you know, the spiritually and so on and so forth, it's equal in the eyes of God, as it were. Yet, in application, of some of the things that go on. That's not necessarily happening. It's not equally applied. So when you say equal, what do you mean, and how do you define equality?
Yes, I think that, I myself was raised and listening to people saying, we are equal before God and we are complementing each other within society. But we have to be very cautious with this discourse, because the master and the servant are complementing each other. So we're not talking about true equality here, which is not the case within Islam. And some of our great scholars in the past, they were very bright and very open as to the principles, but they were very much influenced by their culture at that time, and they are saying things about the relationship between, for example, one of the great Sunni scholars that we had, Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, is talking about the relationship between slave and master, between men and women. So this is cultural. This is not Islamic, because Islam is not talking about this. So when we come to marriage and when we come to the social life, we have to be very clear here that we are talking about also equal rights within the big picture. So equal doesn't mean sameness, it doesn't mean similarity, so we understand that there are specific roles. But for example, if you are working and a woman is working, doing exactly the same job with the same skills, no way that there is a difference in salary. We have to be clear on this. So this is where, for example, we are talking about accepting something which is struggling for women's rights, because that's true. Same skills, same job, same salary. No discussion about this. Nothing in Islam could justify the fact that you don't have the same salary. So, and this is where we have to be quite clear on equality when it comes to, for example, even in the whole philosophy of inheritance. If you look at the details, you don't get the picture of why, for example, a woman can get half of her brother. Why? Because in fact, if you look at the whole picture, his duties as to serve the family are duties that she doesn't have, and she has rights not to work even. So you have to put this within the whole philosophy and not take one detail without understanding the whole picture.
I think that's an important distinction you make. I want to go back to the point that you're making about equal salary and so on. Some people listening to you forget about equal salary. Yeah. Women shouldn't even be working, and that would be something that would be said. What's the,
that's completely wrong. I think that the fact that you have a responsibility within your family, by the way, the responsibility towards the family is not only relying on women, and this is wrong. You know what is the main problem that we have today within the Muslim families? Is the absence of the father. It's not the mother that is the problem today. So when we keep on talking about women in Islam, I want a program on men in Islam, because this is a problem. The problem is the absent father that we have in the West is exactly what we find in Muslim majority countries. We have to be very cautious here when it comes to, for example, a woman who has skills. She has skills. She can be a physician, she can work in the social ground, she can be a teacher, she can be even an economist or whatever. As soon as she has skills that could be useful and it's helping her to get her well-being, she can work. So all this discussion about you can't, of course, it's the decision that you are going to take within your family, between the husband and the wife. This is also something which is a life project. But we cannot say that in Islam, no way, or there is nothing like this for a woman to work. No, that's not right. In the Prophet's time, peace be upon him, they were on the battlefield. They were the one who was involved in the market in Medina was a woman. And this happened also with Umar ibn al-Khattab, who was very tough with women, by the way. So I think that we have to be very cautious with this kind of reduction of women's role within our society and to be critical. This is what I told you at the beginning. We have to be self-critical. There are things that are not going right in the Muslim majority countries, and our understanding of some of the scriptural sources or some of the verses or some of the hadiths are problematic. Now, we should avoid being reactive to the West, but we have to be courageous with our own legacy.
It's interesting, you talked about scriptural sources, and I want to link that back to something you said earlier about the inheritance laws. Yeah. And you mentioned some of the things that, okay, why is it that a woman may well get half that of her brother? Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Why does that happen? And is the fact that responsibility is given to the male, is that in itself a discriminatory factor?
It's not. It's a perception of what the roles, and this is why it's important as well, because when we speak about a family as well as when we speak about a society, there are roles that are distributed. Now, within this, as we understand it, is the man has the responsibility to cover the expenses of the family. This is a responsibility. Now, if you cannot achieve this...
So where is the female role or contribution to that financial well-being?
So this is where, for a woman, for example, she has the right to say, I don't want to work and I want to look after the family. It's a right that she has. It's a duty that he has. Now, it's not only like this. We have to deal with the context. We have to deal with the environment. So to come and to say, this is my right or this is my duty, that's not enough. Now you have to translate this, what we call in Arabic tanzil ala al-waqi', which is how do you translate this in reality? And for example, if your brother is not ready to cover the expenses of his sister, is it right, for example, for him to have the double and for her to have half? No, this is also something which is important, that we have to take people into account, that you have to pay. And if you don't, you better give her the money that she deserves than to keep it for yourself. So the translation of these rules into reality should be clear on one basis. It's not only to literally implement the rules, but to keep in mind the objectives. And the objectives here are justice, autonomy, and respect and dignity for women. The problem that we have is that many men are forgetting Islam when it comes to their duty and coming to the Islamic rules when it comes to their rights. And this is distorting our religion. So when you have such a trend, we have to be critical and say, let us talk about this issue and see how things are going wrong within our communities in the West or the Muslim majority countries.
Thank you for that. Lots of interesting food for thought. We like to keep this show as interactive as possible and really value your opinion. Here is what you sent us this week.
This week we asked, what kind of rights are women given in Islam? Zakia from Canada says, the rights of Muslim women were given to us by Allah, who is all compassionate, all merciful and all just, all unbiased, all knowing and the most wise. These rights, which were granted to women more than 1400 years ago and were taught by the perfect example of the Prophet Muhammad, were given by the one who created us and alone who knows what rights are best for our female natures. Rabia from Sweden says, Islam considers a woman to be equal to a man as a human being and as his partner in his life. Women have been created with a soul of the same nature as man's. And that's all the comments we have for this week. Don't forget to leave your views on our Facebook and Twitter page.
One of the things that's coming out very strongly in all of this is also that there is a difference in the way that things are being applied. And you say that, if you talked about the inheritance laws, but also if we look at the dress code, that's something that's been up for debate. You can see a clear, you can see it visually, clear distinction between the two. What's behind that? What are the principles that lie behind this? Is that equality?
No, that's I wouldn't say equality in the way we are saying if you dress like this, women should dress the same way. This is where the rules are different and the status within the society. But there is something which is undisputable. When it comes to act of faith, it should be free. You should be free to go for it or sometimes to wait for it, and it's a spiritual journey. And I would say any kind of imposition onto this is not the right way. It's a question of educating. Now, when it comes to women, and there is something which is also very important for men and women, it's the principle of modesty, started in the Quran by targeting the man, lower your gaze, and then women. So there is something which is also to be understood in the way you deal with the issue. You have to be modest, and for both. Now, for women, the fact that there is the headscarf and khimar, which is the right Arabic word, is something which is specific to women. That's true, which is not for men, but the principle should be clear. It has to do with an act of faith. It has to be done with your heart, and it's not the starting point of everything.
Historically, to what extent have women been included in civil society and getting involved in the kind of things? And have we got those kind of role models in place and how they could come into use today to apply?
Look, in every field, you will find women within the Islamic history. Starting with the Prophet's life, peace be upon him, women were they gave the bay'ah, which means the political commitment with the Prophet, peace be upon him. They were on the market, and his own wife, Khadija, radiallahu anha, was a trader, a merchant, and she was dealing with money. They were on the battlefield. They were taught. He himself was teaching women. They were scholars with Aisha. The very beginning is about this. And even in the mosques were open to women. Not as we have now in some Muslim majority countries. We don't know where it's coming from, that you don't have even a place. And you say to a woman, you have to pray 5 times a day, but there is no space for you. And the answer is, you better stay at home. What's that? What's that? In the social life, they were there. So I think that here we have to be critical. And then through history, you have women who were transmitting prophetic traditions. They were involved in science. They were involved in medicine. They were involved in teaching. They were involved in politics. So we have women everywhere, but we make it invisible to ourselves. And then we blame the West to send us a picture that we have ourselves built in the way we deal with our own history. We are the first to be blamed for that. And we have to come to a very deep and critical discussion about this. Once again, I agree with what you said at the beginning. We should avoid reacting. But the only way to react or not to react is not to deny. The only way to be confident in this issue is to be self-critical and not to react. So I'm avoiding reacting, but I'm confident with my self-critical approach towards my own history and the way some Muslims are distorting the Islamic message when it comes to women.
Lots of interesting points, Tariq. Has a program provided answers that are satisfactory, or indeed were even the questions the right questions to ask? Or have we also fallen into the trap of framing the discussion in a way that doesn't do the topic justice, and perhaps reactive to external agendas? We'll let you, the viewers, decide. I'm sure we've left out some important topics, but unfortunately the time is up for today's topic. I would like to thank Professor Tariq Ramadan for his views on this topic, and of course all of you at home for watching. Goodbye until the next time and another edition of Islamic Awakening.